What if I told you that the more, perfectly your team follows the rules, the more likely they are to actually fail when a real crisis hits?
It sounds completely counterintuitive,
Phew.
but it happens all the time,
Yeah, all the time. So today we're taking a deep dive into a collection of recently declassified mission logs from the USS Arawyn.
which are just incredible to read.
Oh, they are fascinating. We've got our hands on this stack of primary sources, tactical reports, medical logs, engineering damage control assessments, and even the personal command diaries of the senior staff.
Right, and our mission today isn't just to reconstruct the space battle from these logs.
No, definitely not.
Our goal is to extract a masterclass in organizational psychology. We want to look at leadership under extreme fire and really those deeply human elements that hold the team together when their highly advanced, supposedly infallible systems they completely fail them.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We are looking at a scenario where the ultimate high-performance machine gets hit with a sledgehammer.
A massive sledgehammer.
Yeah, exactly. And I want you, listening to this right now, to keep something in the back of your mind as we go through these logs. Consider how you react when the systems in your own life, your daily routines, your workplace safety nets, your communication channels, when they suddenly crash without warning.
Yeah, to understand the crash, we really first have to look at the baseline. So the deep dive begins with the Arawyn in a state of routine.
Right.
But if you read between the lines of these early tactical and engineering logs, it's not just routine. It borders on hubris.
Oh, absolutely.
They are operating at such a remarkably high level of competency that they've built this illusion of total control.
The logs paint a picture of a crew that is they're almost bored by their own brilliance.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
There is this one incident detailed in the engineering reports right before the disaster. Lieutenant Commander McKinney, the chief tactical officer, leaves a 47-line shadow patch hidden in the ship's tactical buffer.
Which is wild.
It is. He does this unauthorized coding just to manually fix a microscopic targeting drift. I mean, it's essentially like sneaking a custom bypass code into a massive corporate firewall just because you think the default settings are a little sluggish.
Right, which is a profound violation of standard operating procedure.
Totally.
But the response from engineering is what truly establishes this culture of comparable hubris we're talking about. Rennick Duss, who is operating remotely from a starbase, and Elias Harlan, the Arawyn's chief engineer, spot this phantom code.
Uh-huh.
And instead of reporting McKinney for a protocol breach, they outmaneuver him. They actually managed to flush his unauthorized patch out of the system without tripping a single one of the complex alarms he set up.
And McKinney's reaction is just fantastic. The command diaries note that he concedes defeat by physically walking into engineering and delivering a bottle of Isley single malt scotch to Carlin.
A classic peace offering.
Right. But to rub it in, he slaps this oversized, childish red and yellow replicator bow on the bottle. I mean, they are playing a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with the ship's most lethal systems.
And what's fascinating here is the psychological environment that creates. They are stress testing their own systems for fun,
Yeah.
but when a team becomes that comfortable, they begin to view their environment as entirely predictable.
Yeah.
They trust their technology implicitly.
We see that same extreme optimization during their live fire calibration out at the Nabharak Shoals.
Oh, the shoals, yeah.
For context for the listener, the shoals are this ancient, irradiated graveyard of shattered planets. It's a super hazardous environment full of silicate dust and electromagnetic interference.
Not a place for a casual drill.
Exactly. Yet during the drill, McKinney is manually correcting a 0.04-second convergence drift. He's microtuning the weapons because they are picking up sensor ghosts from ancient debris.
Just showing off, really.
Yeah. It's like stress testing a custom-built, liquid-cooled PC. You're running all the benchmarks, you're admiring how fast the processor is, completely forgetting that someone might just trip over the power cord and shut the whole thing down.
Right, and this deep comfort level isn't just technical either. It bleeds into their interpersonal dynamics.
Oh, the medical logs.
Yes, the medical logs from the Vulcan officer Jorik detail this deeply personal reconciliation in the Cree Lounge with Harlan, the chief engineer.
Right, they were previously married.
Exactly. They had ended their marriage because Jorik, adhering to traditional Vulcan philosophy, believed emotional attachment was a dangerous, unpredictable variable.
But Jorik's log reveals a shift here, doesn't it?
It does.
He admits that integrating his emotional love for Harlan hasn't weakened him. Instead, it has made his mental lattice more resilient. He is processing emotion not as a flaw, but as a structural reinforcement to his logic.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, The ship is humming perfectly. Technical bugs are being squashed as a game. Deep emotional wounds are being healed.
Everything is great.
Everything is great. But this peak state of operational flow creates the very required vulnerability that leads to the disaster.
Because they just finished a high-yield weapon calibration, and Starfleet protocol dictates a mandatory cooldown.
Yep, the rules say you have to vent.
Right. They have to drop their defensive shields to vent the massive amount of plasma heat generated by the drill.
Precisely. The system demands a reset. And it's exactly in this window of forced vulnerability, with their shields completely down and their incredibly advanced sensors blinded by the silicate dust of the shoals, that the universe delivers the sledgehammer.
The tactical logs show the ambush happening in a fraction of a second.
It's terrifyingly fast.
Yeah, an unseen enemy uses the drifting iron derelicts in the shoals to mask their approach. They fire physical kinetic slugs first, immediately followed by phased energy strikes.
A brutal combo.
The Arawyn takes a catastrophic direct hit to the secondary hull. Deck 15 is compromised. The main power grid fails. Internal comms go completely dead. The turbolists freeze in their shafts. The centralized brain of the ship is it's severed.
Which brings us to a crucial concept in organizational behavior. The silo effect, but weaponized.
Oh, I like that term.
Yeah, so in modern structures, whether it's a starship or a global corporation, departments rely entirely on centralized data. The bridge sees everything.
Right.
But when that communication network breaks down, the big picture vanishes. Every single department is instantly isolated in a dark silo, and they're forced to make massive existential decisions in a total vacuum of information.
We see the brutal reality of that silo effect down in engineering.
Collingway.
Yeah, Junior Lieutenant Ryan Collingway. He gets thrown to the deck by the blast. The logs show a primary plasma coolant tube shatters near him. The warp core is seconds away from a catastrophic breach that will vaporize the entire ship.
And he has absolutely no comms.
None. He can't ask the bridge what to do.
And without the system to guide him, he has to rely on his foundational training. Collingway's report later notes that in that fraction of a second, he recalled a holodeck training session with the security chief, EF.
Right, the close quarters combat drill.
Exactly. EF had drilled this brutal lesson into him. Hesitation is death.
And that one phrase overrides his fear of breaking protocol. Collingway makes the unilateral split-second call to vent the highly radioactive warp core plasma directly into space and shut the core down entirely.
A massive decision for a junior lieutenant.
Huge. It prevents the ship from exploding, but it deliberately kills their main power, leaving them adrift. He makes a strategic sacrifice without any input from command.
Meanwhile, the leadership in the command silo is dealing with a totally different kind of crisis. Up on the bridge, the physical systems are failing, but the psychological systems are threatening to collapse as well.
The crew is on the verge of blind panic.
Yeah. Yet McKinney, the same officer who was playfully hacking the computer yesterday, stays ice cold.
I love this detail.
The command diaries note that he deliberately drops his voice into a casual, almost conversational tone.
Which is such a masterful psychological tactic. Panic is contagious, right? But so is calm.
Exactly. By adopting a conversational tone amidst alarms and smoke, McKinney is actively overriding the ambient anxiety of the room. He is manufacturing an emotional anchor for the junior officers.
And he starts issuing these seemingly impossible orders. He tells Ensign Torres to fly the ship blindly by visual dead reckoning, literally just looking out the window.
Like driving a car at night with no headlights.
Right. Using only maneuvering thrusters to hide the ship in the shadow of a nearby asteroid. And then he takes it a step further.
The transporter bypass.
Yes. Transporters are offline because of subspace interference. McKinney orders his tactical team to lock out the automated safety protocols. He forces raw auxiliary phaser power, which is weaponized energy, directly into the transporter buffers just to punch a communication and transport hole through the static.
This is an incredibly dangerous maneuver. Forcing weaponized power through a delicate transport system is a massive violation of standard operating procedure.
It sounds like a terrible idea on paper.
Oh, absolutely. A phase variance could fry the entire grid, or worse, fry anyone trying to use the transporter.
So wait, I have to ask a challenging question here. If true resilience in a crisis is just breaking the rules when things go wrong, why have the rules at all?
That's the big question.
I mean, doesn't praising McKinney for hacking the power grid and praising Collingway for overriding the core just encourage reckless cowboy behavior the next time there's an emergency?
That is the core tension of this entire incident, and it's a brilliant question. The The systems and rules aren't useless. They're carefully designed for predictable, nominal environments.
They keep things running smoothly day to day.
Exactly. They prevent everyday catastrophes.
Huh.
But true resilience isn't found in the software of the rules. It's found in the human operator's deep comprehension of why those rules exist in the first place.
Oh.
McKinney doesn't just randomly plug wires together. He understands the raw physics behind the safety protocols. You have to know a system intimately, down to its very bones, to know exactly how and when you can safely break it. Cowboy behavior is breaking rules out of ignorance. Resilience is breaking them out of mastery.
You have to master the rules to know which ones can bend without snapping.
Beautifully put.
That makes a lot of sense. And while McKinney is bending the ship's software, we see the crew physically adapting to their broken environment. Captain Corbin is trapped on Deck 11 when the turbolifts die.
She doesn't just sit there and wait.
No, she doesn't wait for engineering to restore power. The logs detail her physically prying open the doors and climbing the vertical Jeffries tube's 10 decks straight up.
In the dark.
In the dark, fighting severe muscle cramps, sweat, and the violent shuddering of a ship taking heavy fire, just pulling herself rung by rung to get to the bridge.
We see that same kind of physical adaptation in the science lab.
Yeah.
Executive Officer Badenberg is thrown across the room and fractures her arm. Yeah. And the medical logs later show she immediately utilized Vulcan biocontrol techniques, this intense mental discipline, to entirely suppress her own physical pain.
That is wild.
She shuts down her nervous system's distress signals so she can clearly coordinate the rescue of Commander Sorvak, who is pinned beneath a massive dark matter spectrometer.
Which naturally leads us to look at the medical response. Down in the trenches of triage, the contrast between clinical logic and raw emotion is just stark.
It really is.
In the chaotic auxiliary sickbay, Dr. Claire Dunross is dealing with an overwhelming influx of casualties. The logs describe the air smelling of burnt flesh and scorched circuitry.
A nightmare scenario.
And a panicked nurse begs Dunross to give up her sterile surgical suite for the overflow. Dunross icily refuses. She tells the nurse, "We stabilize, we do not solve."
It sounds callous, I know. But in a mass casualty event, perfection is the absolute enemy of survival. Dunross is enforcing strict triage protocol.
She is completely unflinching. The records show she performs a decompression for a tension pneumothorax, which, for those who don't know, is essentially when trapped air puts so much pressure on a collapsed lung that it starts crushing the heart. She does this right there in the hallway, surrounded by madness.
She shuts off her empathy to function.
She becomes a machine to save the humans.
Yes. But then we have Jorik, the Vulcan.
Oh man, this part.
He finally reaches engineering and finds Harlan, his former husband, lying on the deck with an 18-centimeter duranium shard lodged deep into his skull.
Horrifying.
And Jorik, from a culture entirely based on logic and the suppression of emotion, completely abandons his clinical detachment.
He just throws it away.
The logs note he uses raw, adrenaline-fueled physical strength to lift Harlan. He initiates a Vulcan mind Melny's a deep telepathic link, and instead of just monitoring Harlan's vitals, he forces a desperate, commanding mental whisper into Harlan's fading consciousness. Stay alive.
The inversion of their expected roles here is remarkable. It's a total flip.
It really is.
The human doctor operates like an icy, unfeeling algorithm, while the hyperlogical Vulcan is driven entirely by his raw fear and love for Harlan.
Right, and if we look closer at the psychology of crisis, extreme stress strips away our cultivated personas. For Dr. Dunross, her clinical detachment isn't a lack of humanity. It is her coping mechanism.
It's how she survives the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is the only psychological armor that allows her to function in a room full of suffering. But for Jorik, his logic has fundamentally expanded. In that moment of terror, he realizes that saving the person he loves is the single most critical logical imperative in his universe.
Wow.
The crisis doesn't change who they are, it distills them to their absolute core.
That's his heavy. And while Jorik is desperately fighting to keep Harlan's mind anchored up in main sickbay, Dr. Rhea Amberlin is dealing with the limits of their most advanced medical technology.
Right, she's working on Sorvak.
Yeah, she's attempting to save Commander Sorvak by using a genetronic replicator to build a brand new DNA-matched spinal cord.
But even that highly advanced system fails under the chaotic conditions. The medical logs detail a phenomenon called synaptic ghosting.
Right.
Essentially, the nervous system software is rejecting the newly replicated hardware. The technology simply cannot keep up with the neurogenetic drift of the trauma.
So she has to adapt. When the protocol fails, She abandons the replication and places Sorvak in a level 5 stasis field. She literally hits pause on his biological clock, freeing him in time until they can reach a starbase with better facilities.
A smart pivot.
And the second he is stabilized in stasis, she pivots without missing a beat to perform the incredibly delicate cranial surgery needed to save Harlan's brain function after Jorek transports him up from engineering.
It is a constant, exhausting negotiation between utilizing high technology and relying on sheer, stubborn human adaptation.
Yeah.
But while the doctors are fighting microscopic battles for individual lives down below, the leadership up above has to manage the psychological survival of the entire collective.
Right, so the dust finally settles. The adrenaline begins to fade. The Arawyn is severely crippled, bleeding plasma, and hiding in the dark shadow of an asteroid.
It's eerily quiet now.
Captain Corbin finally pulls herself out of the Jeffries tube and steps onto the bridge. And her command diary notes a very specific detail. She doesn't immediately go to sit in the captain's chair.
No, she doesn't.
She stands dead center in the room, bleeding and exhausted, until she has made eye contact with her crew and fully assessed the space.
That is very deliberate leadership choice. The crew has just survived profound trauma. They are adrift.
They need a leader.
By standing upright and unshaken in the center of the chaos, she is establishing a physical and psychological anchor for them. She is silently communicating the structure still holds.
Then the comms crackle to life. It's calling way down an engineer. His voice is shaky. He has to inform the bridge that Commander Harlan's injuries are catastrophic, and he might not make it.
A brutal update to give your captain.
Now, listeners, think about your own workplace for a second. If a major project completely collapses and people are panicking, how does your boss react?
It's a great question.
Corbin's response here is a masterclass. She doesn't raise her voice. She explicitly validates Collingway's massive risk in venting the core, telling him he did exactly what was needed.
Right.
Then she gives him a highly precise, immediate next step. She orders him to secure the secondary coolant tank.
And this raises an important point about psychological first aid. Collingway is teetering on the edge of systemic shock. He is overwhelmed by the massive scale of the disaster.
He needs direction.
Corbin throws him a psychological lifeline by radically shrinking his universe down to a single, solvable problem. She gives his brain a simple task to focus on, which prevents the panic from taking root.
We see that exact same psychological care mirrored down in the medical annex. Jorek is treating Lieutenant Caldwell. Caldwell is suffering from severe thermal burns, but the logs indicate he is suffering from something far more debilitating, which is intense survivor's guilt.
Which is so common in these scenarios.
Caldwell believes that Harlan got that duranium shard in his skull because he was trying to push Caldwell out of the path of the explosion.
And survivor's guilt creates this cognitive loop of self-blame that can be just as destructive to a patient's recovery as the physical trauma itself.
But Jorek spots the spiral. He stops treating the burns for a moment, looks Caldwell directly in the eye, and firmly absolves him.
He breaks the loop.
He says Elias will see no blame in it. Coming from Jorek, the man who loves Harlan the most, that statement completely shatters Caldwell's cognitive loop of guilt. It gives Caldwell the psychological permission he desperately needs to just let go and let the sedatives work.
It's an act of profound emotional intelligence, disguised as a simple, logical assessment.
So after managing everyone else's psychology, what does this all mean for Captain Corbin?
Right. What about her?
The logs show she finally sits down in the center seat. She opens the damage control console and accesses the preliminary casualty report. She reads the words, 3 confirmed dead. Furthermore, her chief engineer and her executive officer are listed as critical.
Just devastating news.
Now, I want you to imagine the sheer weight of that compartmentalization. It's like a computer operating system allocating every single gigabyte of its RAM to a single critical survival program and actively force quitting the grief application because the system will crash if it tries to run both at the same time.
That's a really good analogy.
You are holding the grief of losing 3 of your people, your ship is crippled, and you still have to look up at your surviving crew and calmly order, maintain shields, launch a passive probe.
This is the brutal, true nature of command. It is absolutely not the absence of emotion. Corbin's personal diaries reveal she feels that loss deeply. She writes about a profound ache in her chest that she cannot tend to.
She has to put it in a box.
Exactly. Leadership in that critical window is the strict discipline to defer that grief. She cannot process it yet because her crew still needs a pillar to lean on. If the captain breaks, the entire structural integrity of the crew's morale collapses with her.
She postpones her own humanity to ensure the survival of her humans.
That is the ultimate burden of the center seat.
We have covered an incredible journey through these logs today. We watched the Arawyn crew start in a state of playful hubris, hacking each other's code and healing old wounds.
Yep.
We analyzed the terrifying silo effect of a sudden, devastating ambush that plunged them into darkness. And we examined the raw, unpolished grit required to hold a complex organization and each other together when the automated safety nets completely fail.
And the takeaway here extends far beyond the bulkheads of a fictional starship. When the rigid systems in your own life fail, when a project falls apart, when a supply chain breaks, or a sudden personal crisis strikes, how do you respond?
Right.
Do you freeze because the rulebook is empty? Or do you rely on the deep preparation you've done, adapt your strategy when the written protocols fail you, and lean on the trust you've built with the people around you?
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. The USS Arawyn possessed some of the most advanced tactical sensors, deflector shields, and computer protocols in their entire fleet.
The best of the best.
But all of that technology was blinded, battered, and rendered useless in a matter of seconds by a few drifting rocks and phased energy. If the highly engineered systems and the physical armor designed to protect us are truly that fragile, perhaps our ultimate defense isn't the metal hull we hide behind at all. Maybe, when the sledgehammer finally hits the machine, the only thing that actually saves us is the human connection, the ingenuity, and the deep trust we forge with each other before the disaster ever strikes.